Uh, Today, Monday, March 23rd, we're not going to get into any new content. I'm just going to go over quiz 3.1. You can see the average score was a 94. This thing scored really high. Of course, I expected that with it being open note and open book. As I go through this, I edited the quiz so that it's showing the correct answers. It should on your end now show the correct answers. Please let me know if it does not. So you can go do the quiz correction process. Quiz corrections will be due this Friday. Remember, if you got a 90 or above, you're good. Anything below a 90, I want to see some reflection. I want you to do those corrections. We'll get into new content tomorrow. We're going to finish up Unit 2. Finish up what I'm calling Unit 3, which is the courts and then the president. And then we'll start moving into the last unit pretty soon here. All right, first one in the Federalist 78, Alexander Hamilton states a constitution is in fact and must be regarded by the judges as a fundamental law. It therefore belongs to them to ascertain its meaning, which of the following Supreme Court cases is most relevant to this statement. It's Marbury versus Madison, right? So as judges are considering, right, the Constitution, being that they're the ones that are going to review it. They're the ones that are going to be the ones that take a look at the Constitution closely, right? Well, what does that connect with? That connects with Marbury versus Madison. Why? Because judicial review, right? You're reviewing laws for their constitutionality. So this is the correct answer on this was Marbury versus Madison. Second one. All right. Which of the following describes the origin of the United States court system presented in the diagram? Article 3 of the Constitution establishes the Supreme Court while other federal courts were established by Congress, right? Congress creates the inferior courts. You saw my kid say that in the video. Article 2 of the Constitution, no, does not set up this three-tier court. So here's our three-tier federal court system. What sets that up? Well, Article 3 creates the Supreme Court. Congress creates these lower courts. So Congress is the one that decides that this is how it looks. The Constitution creates this alone, all right? Which following statements best explains the diagram? Cases arising at both the state and federal level may be appealed to the United States Supreme Court. Yes, that is true. Okay, so whether it originates in a state court or whether it originates in a U.S. district court, the United States Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction over that. All right. Which of the following sections of the United States Constitution is most related to the Marbury versus Madison? Article 3. Why? Because that creates the Supreme Court and the federal courts. What is Article 3 and what do? What is their main power? Judicial review. Okay, there you go. Article 1, no, that's Congress. That's Congress. Reapportionment has nothing to do with the Supreme Court exercising judicial review. 10th Amendment, that's states have, their reserve powers that sets up federalism, has nothing to do with Marbury versus Madison. Okay, Article 3. Supreme Court justices were given tenure subject to good behavior by the framers of the Constitution in order to ensure that justices are free from direct political pressure. They are not held accountable to the public at all. All right? They are not elected, and then they serve life terms. Therefore, they are free from direct political pressure. They don't have to worry about being reelected. The difference between an appellate court and a district court is that an appellate court reviews previous court decisions. Okay? There you go. The framers of the Constitution designed which of the following to be least responsive to public opinion? The courts. Congress is very responsive to public opinion. Why? They're elected. The House is elected every 2 years. They've got to be responsive to the people. The courts are not. They're not elected. They serve life terms. During his confirmation hearing, Chief Justice John Roberts stated that Roe v. Wade is the settled law of the land. The statement suggests that in a case that challenges the constitutionality of legislation, restricting privacy and reproductive rights, which the following should be a key factor in the court's ruling. Basically, he's saying it's law of the land. Therefore, it's precedent. It's legal precedent. And we should follow that legal precedent going forward. United States judicial system, when a judge decides a case based on decisions rendered in similar cases in the past, the judge is following the principle of stare decisis. That means let the decision stand. Use precedent when deciding cases. Most of you guys got there. In Worcester versus Georgia, the Supreme Court used the power of judicial review established in Marbury v. Madison to strike down a Georgia state law that regulated the relationship between citizens of Georgia and members of the Cherokee Nation. President Andrew Jackson opposed the decision and famously challenged the Supreme Court to enforce it. As the Supreme Court was not able to enforce the decision, the other branches of government ignored it. This example illustrates which of the following that unpopular Supreme Court decisions can be avoided or ignored if the other branches refuse to cooperate with the outcomes of those decisions. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but yeah, they can. So if Congress and the president get together and they're like, we're just going to ignore this court decision, then they can ignore the court decision, essentially. Which of the following scenarios best illustrates the concept of a case being decided based on precedent? The Supreme Court based its decision in a case involving the Commerce Clause on one of its earlier decisions involving the Commerce Clause. Yeah, I mean, that's just using precedent. That's stare decisis right there. Supreme Court judge expresses the desire to change public policy and alter judicial precedent, which the following terms describes this action. That would be just judicial activism, when judges change public policy through their court decisions and even maybe alter judicial precedent. That is judicial activism. Which the following is true of the Supreme Court. The court helps set the public agenda by deciding which appeals to hear. So when the court decides to hear a case on same-sex marriage, they're kind of helping decide what issues we should consider important, like things like same-sex marriage. The Supreme Court upholds a law passed by Congress as constitutional. The Chief Justice states in the majority opinion that previous decisions supporting Congress's power to make laws based on the Commerce Clause of the Constitution were the basis for the decision. Which of the following legal concepts did the Chief Justice apply in writing the opinion? Stare decisis, right? Let the decision stand. Use precedent when deciding cases. Those who believe the Supreme Court in its ruling should defer to the elective institutions, meaning defer to lawmaking bodies like Congress, are advocating judicial restraint. In other words, we should be very careful about striking down laws that have been created by elective bodies. That is this philosophy of judicial restraint. In which of the following circumstances would the rule of 4 be applied? This is just straight up vocab. At least 4 justices on the Supreme Court agree that a case should be put on the court's docket. All right, you guys did pretty good on this one. Which of the following is an accurate comparison of judicial activism and judicial restraint? Judicial activism is, it's D, is practiced when courts overrule legislative acts or shape policy. Judicial restraint, D, is exercised when courts refrain from interfering with policies created by elected bodies. The following is true of most federal judges appointed by the president. They serve a life on good behavior unless impeached and convicted by Congress. That is true. C said they serve for life on good behavior unless removed by the president. They cannot be removed by the president. They would have to be impeached, and that requires Congress. Which following best defines the term judicial activism? Rulings based on the assumption that judges can make policy as they interpret it. So judges actively changing the law based on their opinions. All right, that is your judicial activism. And then 20 was A. All right, that'll do it for today. You're just going to do the quiz corrections, new content tomorrow. I need a day to kind of reflect and think about how we're going to go from here in regards to the fact that you're never going to be assessed in this course when it comes to the AP exam through multiple choice. So I got to think about that. Regardless, I hope you had a good weekend, and I will talk to you tomorrow.